Maria Blevins is an associate professor of communications at Utah Valley University. Her research focuses on conflict and organizational environmental communication. Before becoming an academic, however, she was a whitewater rafting guide on the New River, Gauley in West Virginia, and Snake Rivers, and she also has served as a river manager on the Madison River in Montana. She has a passion for helping people enjoy rivers and the outdoors, and her current research focuses on sexual harassment in the whitewater rafting industry. She's one of the founding members of the A- Collaborative, an anti-discrimination organization for river professionals through the River Management Society. She received her BS in Outdoor Recreation Management from the University of Maine and Machias, Massachusetts in communication, and a certificate in alternative dispute resolution for natural resources from the University of Montana, and then her PhD in communication from the University of Utah. Jim Miller is the co-founder of Respect Outside, and Jim's 30-year career as a member of the outdoor recreation industry includes raft guiding across the Western US. You can see a theme here. And from mountain travel, SOBEC internationally, marketing and retail training initiatives for brands such as Yakima Racks and Werner Paddles. He's also the ownership of a multi-unit retail specialty store and has consulted to manufacturers and retailers in the outdoor and action sports industries. Jim provides a cultural context to interpret the unique nature of the outdoor industry and apply game-changing initiatives around creating cultures of belonging. So thank you so much, you guys, for being here.
Great. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Risa. Really appreciate it. And thank you, James, for your work making this all happen. And welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be here. And we are going to be talking a little bit about how you come together as a group in remote workplace settings. And really, when you have a short amount of time, how do you get your team members to really gel and come together? And we know that that's really through communication. So we're going to talk a little bit about communication today and how you apply that to remote workplace settings.
So Reese gave such a great introduction, but I'm Maria Blevins. I'm an associate professor at Utah Valley University.
And I'm Jim Miller, again, with Respect Outside. And my partner in that business is Gina McClard. She's actually listening in on this conversation as well. But welcome, everyone. And we're excited to be here with you today. So, yep, that's you.
As a quick overview, today what we're going to cover, to give you a little bit of a roadmap, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the theory of socialization and how that helps us fit into our work groups. And then we're going to go into some of the communicative strategies and skills that we use, how to recognize and respond to unwelcome behaviors, to have tough conversations, and to end it with some skills in bystander intervention. So today we're going to talk a little bit theory and then a lot of praxis and how we put that to use to make great teams. We do, before we start talking, want to tell you that we're going to talk about some hard stuff, sexual harassment, sexual assault, and violence. So please take care of yourself. If you need to take a little break from this conversation, absolutely do. And if you need support beyond what we can provide today, this is the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Do maybe a quick screenshot if you feel like it might be useful, but just mainly take care of yourself today. All right. So I'm going to start out and talk about how I became interested in this topic. So as Risa mentioned, I worked seasonal jobs for a long time, and I started, my very first job was between my freshman and sophomore year of college at a summer camp. And probably about 4 weeks into the season, like half of the staff quit. They just walked out. And those of us that were left with a big responsibility, and it felt like a lot. I continued to notice as I worked at summer camps, raft guiding companies, ski resorts, that this sort of pattern would emerge where in rafting, we called it Angry August. And at about August, people would know that their jobs were ending, right? Seasonal jobs are sort of interesting because it's not permanent employment. And so you know you're going to lose your job anyway. So what is the incentive to stay working there? What is the incentive to give good customer service? What is the incentive to stay sort of loyal to your group team? So Angry August is what inspired this project, is sort of that moment. And I know probably most of us on this call have worked in seasonal gigs, that moment where the wheels fall off. And so when I was starting my master's program in organizational communication, my main question I had was, are there things organizations can do at the beginning of a season so that Angry August doesn't happen in such an angry and radical way? So I'm going to share with you a little bit of my findings. So Jim, the next slide. I base all of my research on a concept called socialization. And socialization is a theory that talks about, how do you know when you become a group member? What is the process where I can start to identify with this organization that I belong to? So socialization is the process. It can happen just naturally, right? You work at a place long enough and all of a sudden it's part of your identity. Or a lot of organizations through training or mentorship will sort of strategically work on that socialization. So a few things about socialization that I think will help us through this conversation is, first, socialization is the process where an individual builds an identity in which their job becomes part of their definition of self. This always makes me think of the classic RAF guide joke. How do you know if someone's a RAF guide? Because they tell you immediately, right? So this is like, this is the people that are so connected to their job that they, it's sort of something that they're really excited to tell you about right off the bat. And as people identify more and more with their organization, as they view their organization as more of a job, it becomes a deeper commitment to the organization. So building an identity with your organization is a really good thing, right? If I feel like I'm part of this organization, let's go back to that first season where half of the camp staff left. They might not have left if that idea of being a camp counselor was part of their identity, a part of who they were. And so socialization is this process of communicating the organization's culture to its newcomers. And all of the research says that organizations that specifically design a socialization program will help their newcomers make a better adjustment to the organization. So as you're managing seasonal employees, you're probably already thinking about what your training is going to look like, maybe what mentorship is going to look like. But what I want to tell you is even deeper than that is creating the organizational culture you want right there at the beginning of a season is super important. And so this is the idea of socialization. Jim, will you give the next slide? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a research project that I did. Like I said, I was really curious about, how do you help seasonal employees build that identity with an organization where they know that that job is going to end at the end of the season? So what I did is a qualitative research project where I looked at folks that were employed in seasonal organizations. So I know not all of these are government agencies like a lot of our audiences today, but it is familiar when you know that the end of the season is in sight. You know that this is not a year-round job. So this study, I used observations. I went and watched organizations do their trainings. I did interviews with seasonal employees. And then the last methodology I used is I handed out journals to all sorts of seasonal employees and had them check in once a week about how they were doing. So I was able to have this really cool longitudinal data. So I could cover like, oh, it's week 6 when Angry August begins, right? This is when people start to feel that burnout or what happens there. The kinds of organizations I worked with on this study were whitewater rafting companies, summer camp employees, rock climbing guides, and ski patrollers. Next slide. I had 2 really cool findings from this study that I want to share with you that I think helps hopefully you manage your seasonal employees. So the first is we often talk about socialization happening in stages. And I found that there were 7 stages that sort of a seasonal employee goes through. The first and most important to set the stage of building identity with your employees is the pre-employment. So this is they're hired. This is the interview process. And then this is the like packet of information you send to them about what this job is going to be. A lot of us have jobs where the employees come and work on site. So are you going to let them know what their living situations are? How thorough is your what to pack, list that you give out? I can remember a raft company that I took a job with, and I was really, really excited, but they did 0 communication in the pre-employment, and my uncertainty reduction is really high. And then I ended up going and finding another job because I had so much anxiety around the uncertainty that I was experiencing. So this pre-employment is important. How are you communicating with your team before they arrive? Then there's the initial arrival.
I'm gonna jump in
Oh,
here
yeah.
real quickly because it's really important here to, you talked about setting the tone and the culture for the organization. This is where it starts, right? This
Mhm.
pre-employment communication, you haven't even met people face to face yet, but you're showing and exhibiting your values now with this communication piece. So
Yeah. The next is the initial arrival. So what is the training that you have planned? Is there a welcome when they get there? Or, I've definitely wandered into jobs where you're like, oh, I wonder where I sleep. And, but is there a system set up to welcome folks, to get them trained on the job, to introduce them to new folks? The beginning of the season, right? This is when things haven't quite reached their busiest. People are still sort of enthusiastic about it. This initial arrival and beginning of the season, just like Jim said, this is when you're building the expectations. And this is when some of these conversations, some of these communication skills that we're going to teach, this is when these are really useful because we're making explicit our organizational culture, the way that we treat each other, the way that that it means to be part of this group. The next is what I call the end is not near. This is sort of my way of looking at angry August, right? So this is the end of the season is still far away, but I'm tired and I'm burnt out. Maybe that first seasonal sweetheart that I found and I have broken up, right? This is when it starts getting difficult interpersonally. This is the time where if you have built that identity with the organization can draw on that, right? Hey, we're doing this because we believe in the mission of what we're doing. Then there's the end of the season, right? Hopefully you're leaving on good terms. Hopefully there's some robust thank you to the hard work that was done. And then postseason, again, thank you, maybe giving a very clear expectation of how the people that you want to reapply are going to apply. So these are the 7 stages. And you might right now be between pre-employment or initial arrival, or maybe even at the beginning of the season. But just know that those 3 stages really set the scene. And if you can teach your employees, you can teach your group how to talk to each other. That's important. So the next slide, my last really interesting finding is, what do seasonal employees value in their jobs? So often we're not making big bucks in these seasonal jobs. I hope maybe all of you are, but I never was. And again, you didn't have any job permanence. So what is motivating folks to do these jobs? And my findings were 5 things. First was creating friendships. People valued the connections they made with their coworkers more so in seasonal jobs than you might in a more traditional job where you're being rewarded with money or insurance or benefits. The next was the support systems. So seasonal employees said that they found a lot of value in the support that they were getting from other people, that sense of team. And today, Jim is going to talk to you about communicative strategies that you can use to make those support systems as strong as possible so that everyone is feeling connected. People were interested in professional or personal growth. And so, how are they going to leave this job and with more skills, with being better prepared? They wanted to feel completely trained. So they didn't want to be put into situations where they didn't feel they could do the job. And they wanted to feel respected and supported by their supervisors. So these are the 5 main things that I found in that study that seasonal employees were looking for. So it's not money, it's not riches, it's not that stability, but they are looking for these things. And one more slide here. And this can be done with communication training. So if at the beginning of the season, you very explicitly outline how we're going to treat each other as a community, and then you practice that throughout the season, that can go straight to the personal growth, straight to the feeling of support, and straight to the building a very good relationship and being respected by your boss. So that's sort of the high end theoretical aspect of this. Now Jim is going to come in and kind of give you the how-to. Communication, we talk about good communication all the time, but the how-to of communication, when we break that into skills, is really useful. And now that is what Jim's going to do.
great. Well, thank you, Maria. That was a great overview and introduction. I know there's so much more to the research that you've done. And we are really, I'll just pause here and say, we're giving you a very high level view of these topics, right? So, you will take this information and then you have to make it your own, right? Make it your own and begin to apply it. So what we like to do is to start by talking about the escalation of unwelcome behaviors before we get into how we can communicate about them. So when we talk about unwelcome behaviors and the work that I do with Respect Outside, organizations often come to us and they will say, hey, we've got a problem with sexual harassment. We've had a report of sexual harassment and we're looking to do something about it. And to then ultimately, you know, I've got this ongoing active problem. And then, so we need help there. And then how do we change the culture so that these types of things don't happen in a, you know, don't get to this level? And what we know is that unwelcome behaviors exist on a continuum from incivility, and incivility, right, is that unwelcome behavior that is, you know, really, you know, it's not an illegal behavior. It is that things like being talked over at work. It is something like somebody taking your idea that you might have shared with them and then presenting that idea to the group as their own idea. Those types of things, those are not illegal behaviors. They're just kind of like in bad form. But what we know about these small, you know, you might call them microaggressions or micro indignities, is that they grow over time when they're not stopped. And so we see this as a really important point at which to interrupt unwelcome behaviors is here when things are small and the beginning phases, and they're just maybe like somebody said something and it wasn't cool. It doesn't really fit with the ethos of the organization. It doesn't really fit with the values that we hold within the organization. So we're going to want to stop those behaviors, and we're going to want to stop them when they're small things like incivility. The next thing we see is bullying, right? And bullying is kind of like that unwelcome comment or behavior that's made in public. So there's a public aspect to bullying that doesn't necessarily exist with just regular microaggressions or micro indignities. And really important here to talk about, you know, that public aspect of bullying. You've all experienced these types of things as well. So the next point is legal behaviors now, right? So we're into sexual harassment and discriminatory behaviors. And so a little bit, just some real high level definitions here that we take from we take basically from federal and state law. So sexual harassment is unwelcome behaviors, including but not limited to sexual advances, visual, verbal, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. So really there are two types of sexual harassment. And what I will encourage you all to do at this point is when we finish this or wrap up, pull out your policies and procedures, right? You might have seen those when you signed up in that pre-employment handbook that Maria was talking about. And you might have had to check your initials at each paragraph and sign the end, and then it went and lived in a drawer forever. Those documents are foundational to how we handle unwelcome behaviors at work. And so we really encourage you to know what's in your specific policies and procedures, so that as a, you know, if you are in a supervisory position, you have a responsibility for being able to take on a complaint of unwelcome behavior. And if you are a worker in the organization, you want to know what your rights are. You know, how do I do this? And is there enough information contained in your policies and procedures to be able to address unwelcome behaviors from, you know, not just the illegal ones, right? Not just harassment and discrimination, but how do we deal with bullying and incivility as well? So please do pull those policies and procedures out, review them, and make sure that you are familiar with them so that you know how your organization functions. But back to harassment and discrimination, there's really two types of sexual harassment. And really interesting here, quid pro quo is that classic sexual harassment. That's when you see the boss demanding sex from their subordinate, their report, in exchange for workplace benefit, like I get to keep my job. And so that's kind of the classic one that everyone kind of thinks of when they think about sexual harassment. But there is also a hostile workplace is another type of workplace harassment, and it is related to your legally protected classes of race, religion, sex, national origin, gender identity, gender expression are also now federally protected as part of your protected class. So, marital status, age, medical condition, there's a long list of these protected classes, and almost everyone is protected under this discriminatory prevention under your protected classes. So again, what we were looking for and what we often encourage folks and employees of organizations is to not have to sit and wonder whether, did the thing that I just see or experience, was that an illegal behavior of sexual harassment? Was it bullying? Was it just simply incivility, right? It shouldn't matter, because what we know is that these live on a continuum, right? So we start with testing behaviors of uncivil behaviors, right? So that's, I maybe say something, and if that gets a joke, that's a joke and I get a laugh, I'm like, oh, great. Everyone here is down with the way that I'm treating other people and joking around. And so then they'll move on to bullying, and then they move up to discriminatory harassment. And it builds this way over time, because what we know is that harassment and discrimination are not, and sexual harassment in particular, right? It's not about sex. It is about power and control, and it is about people testing these behaviors, right? So they test them down below with uncivil behaviors, and they see if they can get away with it. When they can get away with it, they move on to more egregious behaviors, from incivility through bullying and harassment, illegal behaviors of harassment and discrimination. And once you get to these larger illegal behaviors, now you've got a really big problem for not just, the organization, right? You've got a legal problem, but you've got a real big cultural problem, right? Because what you have in the beginning, and all of the things that Maria was talking about, are ways that we build trust, right? We're building trust with our group so that we can function when we are working in remote locations, right? So when we talk about kind of risk factors for unwelcome behaviors, you all are working in environments that have a lot of risk factors that come up, and those tend to be things like having a young staff, working in remote locations with little to no supervision, a homogeneous staff. So like if your group is all a bunch of white dudes, there's more opportunity for harassment and discrimination to exist. Dating, Maria mentioned a little bit about that, dating at work. And so again, look to your policies and procedures to see, is there a dating policy where you work? Of course, we know that a supervisor dating their report is, by definition, harassment, sexual harassment, but you might have peer-to-peer dating, right? And we see this all the time. You go out into the field, you hook up or you date somebody for a period of time, but then you return to base camp and then you don't want to be dating anymore. And this creates those kinds of strange things that we have to work through and deal with. And what's going to get us there is really clear communication. So the last behavior that we look at is workplace violence. And it's really, we see more and more workplace violence, with nearly 400,000 aggravated assaults occurring in the workplace last year. You see this on the news all the time, where somebody gets fired from their job, or maybe not even fired. They just go away, come back with a gun, and begin shooting things up. This is workplace violence, and there were over 4,000 fatalities in 2020. So not to be dismissed, but also if you look at this, right, as an escalation of behaviors from small things all the way to the most violent acts, we need to begin to figure out how to stop those before they grow over time and become more dangerous to everyone. So I'm going to ask, can I ask James, how many folks do we have on the call? Do you know?
Yes, there are 31, including us. So
great. So
7.
Yeah, let's use chat if you can. Grab that chat function, that chat bot there, and write down if you know of a technique or a tool that you have available to you to stop unwelcome behaviors. What might those look like right now? I'm going to pull my chat over here. So throw in the chat any tools or techniques that you have to minimize kind of unwelcome behaviors. What are you going to do? Ask them to stop. Yes, that is great. What else? Go to my supervisor, walk away. Good. See something, say something. Excellent. Right. So you guys are on the right track. So here's what we know we can do, right? Which is, and I mentioned this already, look at your policies and procedures, right? Those are your guiding foundational organizational documents. They should give you some idea about how the organization responds to unwelcome behaviors and how they expect you to report or behave once you see those types of behaviors. So being able to kind of identify, and I said this before, it's not incumbent upon you to know whether that behavior that you're experiencing is illegal, harassment and discrimination, or simply like an uncivil behavior. But
Jim, I'm going to jump in. There were two more here that once you got started,
Yeah.
Tammy says, ask someone to explain what they mean when they tell a harassing or discriminatory joke. And Mary said, ask them if they know what their words can mean to the opposing side. So I thought both of those were really great.
Yeah, I think I love that. And we're going to talk later in the session about bystander intervention, which is exactly what both Maria and Mary are really talking about here, right? Which is directly talking to the person about how their words or behaviors are affecting you and the group. So making sure that you can, as you prepare to do this work, right? So you need to be able to embrace your own mistakes, right? And this is here I am, right? Old, white, cis het male. I make mistakes all the time. I am learning about this as I go. And I am the perfect example of somebody who I try to be an ally. I don't always get it right. And so I need to be kind of aware enough about myself and humble enough about myself that when somebody approaches me and says, hey, the thing that you said in the meeting really hit me in the wrong way, we're going to talk about like, how do I take that feedback and what do I do with it, right? It's kind of hard. So again, look to your company's values. Really, really important to know what the values are of the organization that you're working in. And what that allows you to do is to remove the kind of like, I said, and then they said, and then I said, and then they said, and really be able to point to the values of the organization. And you can then say, hey, here at RMS, we believe, right? It's a value that we all hold together and that we're all trying to work towards. And so knowing what those values are really, really important. Listening with an open mind, being innovative and creative about how to solve these issues, especially when you're in a remote setting, right? You don't necessarily have all the full support of your HR team there with you. And so we need to be able to think nimbly and on our feet and make sure that we're using our understanding of how folks receive unwelcome behaviors. Really, really important to make sure that we can give them good feedback in the moment that we're getting it.
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
Jesse had a really good suggestion. It's sort of preventative medicine. Having a group check in at the start and the end of the day, I think it helps everyone remember the human, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's great, right? So we all have work to do, right? We all have, daily meetings and maybe work assignments that are given out, but we really like to encourage folks to do something that is kind of like a little grounding maybe, and it might sound a little woo-woo to some folks, but can you do a 2-minute meditation? Can you do something like, hey, let's just have everybody stand up and practice tree pose, right? Get them out of their heads into their bodies a little bit. And then those reminders about culture and about values and about this is a great time to really showcase something that worked well with bystander intervention or communication strategies, or even better, when it didn't go well, especially if you are that supervisor and you didn't quite get it right, sharing that with the group and then the invitation to say, hey, I tried it, it didn't work. This is what happened. What could I have done differently or better in the future so that I don't end up in the same situation? So really, we talk about leadership and vulnerability. I don't love the word vulnerability because a lot of people say, oh, vulnerability means weakness, but really vulnerability means, it's really awareness. So being aware of yourself and what you're comfortable with too. And we're going to get a little bit more into how to make bystander intervention and these kinds of tough discussions your own, right? They have to fit your personality or they're not going to work, right? So oftentimes when we get to bystander intervention, everybody has mentioned kind of like these direct conversations with people that have exhibited an unwelcome behavior. What if I don't feel comfortable with that, right? What if I'm not the person who can stand directly up to somebody? And what if they're my supervisor? Right now, I'm supposed to directly tell my supervisor something that's really hard. So that's what we're going to get into now. So tough workplace feedback. Hold on one second. So we need to start by really recognizing that we all come to organizations and work with our own understanding of who we are and the socialization that we've received from from birth to to today. And that affinity bias is really a unique bias in that it stymies a lot because what it does is it says, hey, I'm going to hold in highest regard people that are like me, right? So if it's me, I'm white, cis, het, male. I'm going to look to give that great work assignment to somebody, like I trust myself to get the work done, right? I know I'm a hard worker. I'm going to trust somebody that's just like me to get that work done. And so I look to people like me to choose for work assignments. And so the challenge is to kind of recognize that, right? Recognize that it's just baked into us. The bias is not something that it's something that you can manage and control, but it's not something that you have a choice over, right? It's baked into your brain. So, the way that affinity bias shows up is this preference for, folks like me, and it creates an in group, and then it creates an out group. And so, recognizing that you have affinity bias and that you need to really kind of slow down and take a look at how you communicate and how you give out work assignments, really, really important. And again, we could spend days talking about affinity bias and how it shows up in work and what to do about it. But just be aware that it is a real thing and it does affect how you communicate with teams. So the other thing, especially as supervisors, right? We talked about this before. We have this, like, hey, we've got this job to do, and so I'm going to give out the work assignments, and we're going to go do the job. And so we're really in this mode of like leading the team to perform the tasks that are needed to get the job done. When we're talking, especially about hard things, we need to kind of step back away from like, I'm the boss, I'm always right, I'm the leader, you listen to me, right? And open up and have switched to kind of more of a learning mode. And that learning mode is like, I'm here to hear what you have to say, and I'm here to, help problem solve. And if I'm the problem, right, I'm here to say, I'm going to do something to change my behaviors as well. So that, just being open-minded, slowing down, asking questions that promote reflection. This is a really important one, right? So again, oftentimes because we're at work, we're in this kind of work mode, and we want to get the job done that we've been paid to do. And if that's leading people to get the trail built, that's what we're doing. But really, we need to be able to back it up a little bit and make sure that people are feeling heard and that we are getting to the truth of what they're saying. So coming from a place of caring, and this is a big one, right? Can we share? If you've got something hard to say to somebody, you need to check to see, like, is this feedback better shared in private, or is it a really learning opportunity to share with the group? Now, if I am the person who So go back to that example of I'm the leader and I made the mistake and I'm asking for the group to coach me. That is a great opportunity to do that in public. And again, those times, those Monday morning huddles, those are great places to do that. But, you have to kind of have situation awareness. And you do this all the time at work, right? Whether you're, walking through the mountains or rafting down a river, you are checking the scene for safety. And the same thing here, right? You want to make sure that when I act, am I acting in the best way for the entire group? So oftentimes sharing feedback in private is better. And then you can say to that person like, hey, can we use the discussion we just had to share with the larger group so that we can all learn from it, right? And this goes back to, we talk about safety at work all the time, especially in these kind of outdoor environments. You have a risk management plan. It's 900 pages long. You talk about every conceivable option for what to do when somebody twists their ankle. How are we going to evacuate them? We want to be able to do those same types of safety scenarios in our head that relate to interpersonal treatment of people. So the way we do that is really we discuss the impact to the team and the result of that behavior, as opposed to, how I felt personally. And here's when we talk about feedback, people all often hear feedback like, hey, Maria, I'm going to give you some feedback right now. And Maria might be like back on her heels thinking like, oh, I'm going to get the shitstorm right now. So if you can rephrase feedback to use the word advice, can I give you some advice, Maria? Or can I share my perspective with you, Maria? Right? Those are easier ways and don't put people's guard up so quickly. And then really getting, this is that piece that we talked about, like, are you creating a culture where this kind of conversations are welcome? So we're not just talking, when we talk about safety in the workplace. So I'll use an example. We're on a rafting trip, the boat is wrapped and we set up a Z-drag system, and a first-year guide walks into the impact zone of a Z-drag. That is something that we would call out immediately. We would call it out loudly and directly to that person and say, hey, Jim, you're in the impact zone, move to the left, right? So you give them, like, you're in danger, move away from the danger. And that we do that with safety related to our physical bodies all the time. We need to learn how to do that as it relates to our psychological well-being and within our work groups. So making sure that the team understands that we communicate in this way, right? We're open to having people call out unwelcome behaviors here. We're open to giving and receiving hard feedback. And then we have to model that, right? We have to practice it in order for it to take root. So again, we're going to just jump onto chat real quickly. What are some reasons that folks might give for not wanting to intervene when they see some sort of unwelcome behavior at work? So again, use chat, reasons for not intervening. Great, I don't feel comfortable or confident. Fear of retaliation. Yeah, it's not a safe space to voice it. Don't want to cause conflict. Someone more senior than will speak up. You guys are right on it. These are all reasons that folks will say, hey, somebody else, if there's a whole group of folks and I'm, can I be the only one noticing that this is strange or off? That can't be right. Well, I'm just going to be quiet until somebody else brings it up. Not having the confidence or to do it. And if you don't have the confidence, we're going to show you some other ways that you can interrupt behaviors as well that will fit more to your personality. Right. And that retaliation, that's a big one, and one that I didn't really mention when we were talking about the illegal behaviors of sexual harassment and discrimination, which are when you are experiencing harassment at work, one thing that you can do is to start keeping track of those incidences of harassing behavior. And you can do that. It depends, what your situation is. Oftentimes we will say, email yourself the who, why, what, where, when of those, as much detail of those things as possible, and email it to yourself on your personal email. That date and timestamps that kind of communication to yourself. And then you're building it so that you're seeing if it's a pattern, right? If I'm experiencing a pattern of unwelcome behavior, that's what it looks like. But and then you may choose to report that. If you choose to report that or bring it up to the work group, but then you experience retaliation because of that, especially if it's a illegal behavior of harassment or discrimination, that's a whole nother, excuse me, that's a whole nother issue that stands alongside the initial claim of harassment and discrimination. But so if you start to experience retaliation, again, keep track of those retaliatory behaviors in the same way so that you're, again, building that deck of dates and times and places that these behaviors occurred, so that when you do make a report, you can jog your own mind and remember what happened, what was said, and those types of things. So I think you really got it, that retaliation, just, like, I'm new here, I don't know what the culture is, and so especially if you are a leader within the organization, really setting that culture is super important. So we can do that a little at a time, and we're going to do that by talking about bystander intervention. And let me check time, we're in good shape. So bystander intervention is the research proven method. So what happened, right? So we had the Me Too, hashtag Me Too, right? 2016, that movement really gains a lot of momentum. And so what happens is money begins to flow into research around sexual harassment. And what is shown is that, over the decades previous, folks would get trained on sexual harassment. They would say, this is what sexual harassment is, quid pro quo, hostile workplace. Here's all the behaviors that are bad. Don't do any of these things. Good luck. So simply knowing what sexual harassment is doesn't stop sexual harassment. What we need to do is we need to interrupt those behaviors in the moment that they're happening, as close to the moment as that they're happening. And the idea with bystander intervention is that you are, three things to think about. You and the target of the behavior being safe. Number one, always. So you would, again, if you can apply kind of your safety understanding, like you're hiking in a rockfall area, you need situational awareness. You want to make sure that the group is safe. And the same thing with bystander intervention, making sure that you and the target of the behavior are safe, and that you're not going to make the situation, dangerous for anyone. The next is to stop that behavior in as close to the moment that it's occurring as possible. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the last piece is to stop future incidences of the behavior. So that is kind of that debrief piece that we talked about a little bit earlier. So what we're going to talk about now is 4 different ways to interrupt unwelcome behaviors in the workplace. Important that you pay attention here, because we're going to then move into a breakout where you and a small group will discuss one of the 4 Ds that we'll be presenting. I'll give you a little bit of a scenario. You'll move into a breakout room and talk through it. And then we'll come back and have a little bit of a discussion. So distraction is the first D to bystander intervention. And it is simply, changing the subject. It is striking up an unrelated conversation. It could be as simple as slamming the door, right? It does not necessarily need to be you verbally saying something, but when you see something that's not quite right, you can, change the subject, or you can, jump in with some sort of unrelated topic around, the party that you were at last night, or if you can move it back to work, whatever it is, you're just simply interrupting the kind of the conversation that's happening that you see going in the wrong direction. The next D to the 4 Ds of bystander intervention is delaying support. And so that is checking in with the target of the behavior and giving support to them. So, and I love delay support because I really feel like it is applicable to almost every situation, right? So even if you used direct intervention, going back and talking to the target later with delayed support is very, very valuable. And what is great here is that I'm learning, right, as I do this with the person. So I see something that is unwelcome. Maria's having a conversation and somebody says something to Maria and I'm not quite, maybe hear it all. Later, I can go to Maria and say, hey, Maria, I heard you and Joe talking. It sounded like this happened. What do you think about that? Is there any way that I can support you in this? And then if I hear the story, do we want to go report this? Or how are we, can I support you going forward, to talk to Joe directly or, whatever it is. So I'm learning about what Maria's boundaries are like, right? Maybe Maria wants to handle it all on her own and she doesn't want, bossy white guy Jim butting in to save the day, right? That's not my intent, right? But we want to make sure that we don't have kind of this savior complex as well. So checking in, making sure that people feel supported, that you heard and saw the same thing that you thought they were experiencing. So you're kind of checking reality with them and checking their response to that. Really, really important to help with delay support. Delegation is where you get help from authorities. So, this again goes back to understanding with your policies and procedures. What is your formal reporting structure look like within your organization? Making sure that you understand that, because when you're in the field, you may have it. A really advanced organization would have that information available offline on my phone so that I could check to see what my procedural steps are. But really just making sure that the folks that are with more authority than you know about the situation so that they can do something about it, right? And as a supervisor, when you know or should have known that unwelcome behaviors in this form, especially those illegal behaviors of harassment and discrimination are taking place, you have a legal requirement to do something about them. So really, really important to make sure that you're moving complaints of unwelcome behavior up the chain so that the organization knows about them and can do something about them. And the last one is direct intervention. And this is what everyone thinks of when they think of bystander intervention. And that is directly speaking to the offending person so that they know that what they're saying is unwelcome. And you can do this. Somebody was, said it in the chat earlier, that question of, hey, what you just said, do you realize how that landed? Or that wasn't very welcome to me, or, it can really, the idea here is that you are not just interrupting them and with distraction, right, which is one way, but really telling them specifically, this is the behavior that is unwelcome here and why it's unwelcome. And you might have to do a little bit of education along the way when you get into these kinds of conversations. So what we're going to be doing is moving into a breakout situation. And I'm going to set up 4 breakout rooms. Room 1, we'll talk about distraction. Room 2, we'll talk about delay support. Room 3, we'll talk about delegate. And room 4, we'll talk about direct intervention. And I'm going to give you a scenario. Hold on one second. And I'll repeat this again. So you are working on a trail crew. Sue is giving the daily announcements and handing out work assignments when the ranger, Rick, comes over and interrupts her. Rick interrupts her and says, you all better listen to Sue. She's tiny, but can really handle a shovel and pick. Women have to be so much tougher than guys out here to make up for their lack of physical strength. So again, that's the scenario that Sue and her work group has experienced. And we're going to send you into these breakout rooms to discuss them. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys, y'all had a good conversation. And we're going to start by having the folks that were in room one talk a little bit about the distraction and how they apply distraction to this scenario. And when you were all away, we were talking a little bit about this scenario, right? It's a challenging one in that you've got a third party. So it's not part of your work group, right? This is third party that is actually harassing the trail crew. And they're somebody with authority. So it makes it a little bit challenging, a little bit unique to be able to address this. So can somebody from room one come off mute and talk about what they discussed as it related to distraction?
I can go ahead and talk a little. We talked about how it might be awkward because she's giving announcements, but then, like could ask like about an event coming up or something like that. Just change the topic. We also talked about how we would probably do a combination of some of these, and it wouldn't just be that one in the situation, and that we'd probably check in and offer support and things like that. So
Yeah, I love it, right? Because what's great is that these are not intended to be used, like I did distraction and then I'm done, right? I did distraction and I did delay support. And it might be that you need to, delegate as well, right? Because Ranger Rick's boss would want to know as well that that they're, interrupting folks and saying unwelcome things. So really, really important. But really, and I think you highlighted a really important point, which is we need to make this our own, right? It needs to be able to fit with our own personality so that it comes natural. And so I'm the type of person who does not like, direct confrontation. I really struggle with that, but I'm learning and building capacity to do it. Depending on the situation and depending on your personality and depending on how much capacity and resources you have, you can choose different ways and different combinations. So excellent work. Really appreciate it. How about room two to talk about delay support?
Yep, I'll speak for that group. And so we had a lot of our conversation was based around the difference in the district ranger level versus the field level too, and where we all fit in with that and who would be comfortable talking, not talking at that level that district ranger comes in at. So we definitely felt that with the delay, anything that we do right then and there would probably just exasperate the situation a little bit. So yeah, it was definitely wait for that district ranger, that leader to leave, and then just check in with that crew lead or Sue and see how she's feeling. And then really base where we move next off of her responses to us. Is she comfortable talking to the district ranger, or do we need to get other people involved at that direct intervention or delegate level? So that was kind of our quick discussion.
That's great. Yeah, I think you hit all the high points, which is really making sure that Sue, right, who was the target of the behavior, is feeling like, hey, I was trying to do my job and I got interrupted from doing it. It might have thrown me off a little bit. But did anybody else notice that? That seemed really weird to me, but maybe that's just normal. I don't know. So really making sure that Sue feels your support and knows that hey, that was not cool, not welcome. And we understand that. And we have a road map to reporting that behavior. So great. Let's hear from room three with delegation.
So we talked about it, we just kind of was an assumption that it was a district ranger and the challenges that it can bring, because that person is supposed to be the lead. They are supposed to be the one you can go to, and how uncomfortable that can get. This is something that's directly happened to me on the forest, and my district ranger just kind of told me I need to come to him with options and solutions of how he can implement. And from that experience, I just kind of learned that I need to delegate myself and tell them what I need rather than what they think should happen.
Yeah,
So I guess in that sense, we are the authority in like specific situations, like with Sue, is like become your own authority, I would say.
yeah, that is great. I like your take on it, which is like, hey, I'm going to resource myself to be able to deal with this. Especially if I hit a little roadblock as I try to move the complaint up the chain. What do I do? And again, your policies will dictate what that looks like. And we always recommend with policies to make sure that there's multiple avenues to report, so that you're not just stuck reporting to a single person. We encourage organizations to have at least one non-male, so one woman or woman identifying person to report to. Anonymous reporting options are incredible. We don't always get the full picture of a report, or enough information to do an investigation with an anonymous complaint, but they do give this data, trending data around, hey, unwelcome behaviors are occurring in this location. They tend to occur around this time frame. And so you can get some clues to maybe where it's happening and how it's happening, what kind of behaviors. Is it related to somebody's sexual orientation, or is it related to their race? And so you can then begin to target train against those kinds of behaviors. So but really great idea of basically going to your boss, saying this is the situation, and they have a responsibility, right, to take care of that, to make sure that you are free from harassing and discriminatory behavior. That is their legal responsibility. So don't be afraid to move it up the chain. It's encouraged, and it will be encouraged. It should be encouraged in your policies and procedures to keep moving up and funneling unwelcome behavior complaints to the right place. Awesome. So the last one, let's do direct intervention.
Yeah, hey. So we talked about how it would kind of depend on who you are in the group, like how much influence you have within the group, for what you could say. But we felt like pretty much anybody in this group could say something like, hey, that's not really a cool thing to say, or say like, what did you mean by that, Rick? And perhaps if you had more influence in this group, you could expand upon that and give Sue a little bit more support.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I like, like even just a joke, right? Like making it, but the point is making it your own, right? And you mentioned that depending on how much power you have within that work group, is going to really dictate how you behave. So I use myself as an example a lot, right? I sit next to power and privilege in almost every conceivable way of my identity. I'm well educated. I'd say the one area is I'm middle class and not rich, but in every other way, cis, het, white, educated, I live there, right? And so when I raise my hand and say, hey, Rick, uncool, I have so much less to lose than somebody that has a more marginalized identity. And that marginalized identities would be somebody like, imagine if I was a woman. Now imagine if I was a Black woman. Now imagine I was a queer Black woman, right? So all of these identities don't exist in a silo, right? They are intersectional in nature, and they relate to, and then you've got to look at folks' past experiences as well, right? So people bring their trauma to work, right? And so being able to, that's again, going back to that tough workplace conversation, slowing down, understanding who it is that is telling you something. And if you're receiving that report of unwelcome behavior, somebody's talking to you about that, and you're like, hey, I'm not quite sure, Sue is reporting this unwelcome behavior to me, but like, she's not upset. She's not crying. She's just kind of like told me kind of matter-of-factly. And so maybe it's not that big a deal for Sue, right? This is, you cannot take people's physical response and the way that they're showing up as evidence of their of how it's affected them. So again, making sure that you understand that folks that have different identities are going to need different things and need additional support and need to really feel heard to keep that trust building within an organization. Really, really important. So again, great job, you guys, on all of that. And we're kind of getting close to the end of our session now. Would love to take any questions that you all have for Maria or for I at this point. And you could, I don't know how you want to do that, James. You want people to chat them, or you want them to come off mute and just raise their hand, or?
People could come off mute and ask questions or drop them in the chat box if they don't want to speak up.
Great. So any questions at all? You know, we did a lot of information in a very short amount of time, meant to kind of give you an overview of these topics. And the idea is that you can take them back to your work group and just begin, just start to practice and do what's comfortable for you, and make sure that you are building that trust and keeping that trust high. As Maria said, people, that's what folks are looking for in these seasonal jobs, is a sense of belonging and a sense of community. And you can create that sense of community by building trust and explicit communication structures within your organization, and say, hey, when we have a problem, this is how we deal with it. We talk directly about it. And I'm going to, hold your identity in close and make sure that I am trying to support you as best I can. And that we realize, one thing that we really didn't talk about was this idea and the excuse people give of saying things like, hey, that was not my intent. I really didn't mean to shit all over Maria. I'm sorry she felt that way, right? That's not the answer. The intent versus the impact to Maria. What we want to be focusing on is impact to the person who's received the behavior, and not the person perpetrating the behavior and their like intention. Oh, I didn't really mean it. I know that can sound really harsh, but number one priority is the target of the behavior and the impact of that behavior to that target. So,
Jim, if I can just follow up with that, this is Maria here, that you're at the beginning of your season, and sometimes workplace cultures just develop if you don't strategically build them. And so by bringing up, a quick discussion of the four or five Ds, you can present your staff with a vocabulary that they can incorporate. So then later on in the season, we know that we feel comfortable, saying, hey, this didn't feel great. That's why I'm going to use distraction here. But right now at the beginning of the season, you have a great chance to really lay those expectations out.
Great. Yes, Risa, I see a hand raised.
So if you were doing the same talk again 1 year from today, and a similar group was here, different, maybe, and some people said, we're not any farther forward. We're still like this frustrating, or we have completely started moving down the path of being really happy with how we are with our team development. What would you say are the components, experience? What's in the recipe of nothing happened versus the recipe of like, we got it, what would you say?
Yeah, I'll lead and
Go
then
for
Maria can, which I'd say leadership participation is it. So these initiatives live and die by the organization's leaders embracing bystander intervention, embracing these communication techniques, so that they can, because basically I'm a young worker, I'm looking up to see how do I behave here, right? And I look to my leaders, and if my leaders are, saying racist and homophobic things, then I'm like, cool, I can totally say these types of things and they are okay here. But if I'm told really directly and explicitly, like that behavior is not welcome here, then I modify my behavior very quickly, because I want to fit in, right? I do want to fit in with the group, and I want to do what's right. And people especially young people, don't often have a lot of experience, right? They're coming from high school or, maybe an advanced degree, whatever. But they don't have a lot of at work experience, and they need to be shown how it is to be a worker in your organization.
And I think my answer would be, we talked about socialization right at the beginning. Some of us that are in positions of leadership maybe got socialized into our organizations 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And it can be hard because we are so used to the way that a culture exists to know that it might not be comfortable for everyone, or it might not feel safe for everyone. So I think just opening the dialogue, I think probably figuring out that nothing's going to happen when we were scared to bring it up, or we think, oh, it's totally fine. But I think that if we just even create a space, the worst thing that could happen, or the best thing that could happen, is people are like, no, this environment's great. But if you're even asking the questions or inviting a space for those conversations, you can sort of see how it is. Chelsea, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. This has been really helpful presentation so far. And I'd like to just switch gears a little bit in that, most of us work with seasonals, but a lot of us work with volunteers even more than seasonals anymore. And I can see a lot of parallels in this, or using the same system with volunteers. But is there anything you would recommend differently? Just because usually we're dealing with different age groups, very different ideas of life and how it should be done. So any changes you would recommend if working with volunteers?
Yeah, I think that because volunteers aren't so inculcated into your organization necessarily, right? Making sure that, and going back to what Maria shared with that pre-employment information, including code of conduct type of language. Really, really important to set the stage early with folks and make sure that they understand that, like, hey, unwelcome behaviors aren't welcome here. We don't tolerate them. This is what we do when folks experience unwelcome behaviors. I think, folks want to do the right thing, and they just need to be shown what the right thing is. So listing code of conduct, communicating early would be my answer. And I'm sure Maria's got more for you.
I mean, my main thing is I'm imagining that, even less than a seasonal employee, a volunteer isn't being motivated by money or benefit. They are looking for, I think they're probably looking for that socialization. They're looking for that identity. They're looking for community. They're looking for kinship. And so I think my approach would be that they're probably also looking for respect, and that they're going to feel like they're bringing things to the table, and their expectations might be really different than your organization. So to say, like, welcome, we're like so happy to hear that you're here. I'm imagining a lot of these volunteers might be a little bit older, right? I'm thinking of campground hosts that I've run into. And so really acknowledging that, like, we value all of your expertise you're bringing, and here are expectations that we have about how we're treating each other. And it might be different generationally, but that that they're, expect the best from them. That they're flexible and smart and can't wait to be participating in the community in this way that we have our expectations. I don't know if that helps, Chelsea, but yeah.
It does. Yeah, thank you both. That was helpful.
And I think, Maria talks about generational impact to it. This is, we see this everywhere we go, where we have, older bosses and younger employees, and they're used to, telling that employee, I'm the boss, do it this way. And that employee saying, like, I'd like to give you some feedback. And they really want to be involved. Young folks want to feel a sense of community. They want to feel a sense of belonging. They want to feel a sense of being on the team. And so if you kind of have a command and control style of supervising those folks, they're going to kind of get thrown by that. They want to be invited in to see the inner workings. How does the sausage get made?
And I'll add one thing about the generational stuff. As someone that teaches at a university, I'm getting to interact with this Gen Z, and they are just more open about the expectations, and they're sort of putting up with less falderall than maybe I did as a college student. And so I think they're going to be a really interesting force as they come to work and they come to volunteer at places, because they're actually not scared to talk about these things, and they come with that expectation. And so I think that that's a big change that I see as I'm interacting with these young folks, that things that I was like, we would have never talked about this when I was your age, but they are willing and eager and able to jump in.
Great. Any other questions? We've got a couple minutes. Well, excellent. We're going to wrap up. I want to make sure Maria's put her email address up here for you. If you want to reach out to Maria, you can get me. I'm jim@respectoutside.com. And feel free, if you have questions for Maria or for I, to email us directly. Happy to kind of continue the conversation. And thank you, Risa's put my address up in the chat for everyone. But we want you to have a great season. And again, take what this, again, a barrage of information for you today, but just begin slowly to try some of these techniques, share about bystander intervention and how that is an expectation. And oftentimes with organizations, when we're working with non-government agents, not the government, we'll encourage folks to put feedback, that postseason, the exit interview that folks have, and making sure that there's some sort of conversation that happens at the end of the season about what we call human skills, right? What you might call soft skills, those human skills, those interpersonal skills. Are you talking about them on a regular basis, as opposed to just simply talking about like job performance? You hit your sales number, whatever it is, right? Those metrics are really, really important, but the other metrics that are equally important is how folks are being treated at work, and making sure that you're having that discussion before the season, as Maria says, all throughout the season, and finishing up with the exit interview, making sure that you are talking about the values of the organization and how folks should be treated. So again, thank you all.